If you have ever used buy now, pay later and told yourself it is just a small payment, this is going to feel familiar. Because nothing about it feels like a bad decision. It feels manageable. It feels controlled. It even feels responsible, like you are handling your money the right way. But if you slow that moment down for a second, what is actually happening is a little different than it seems. Because you are not just deciding how to pay for something, you are deciding how to think about the cost. And that shift is so subtle that most people do not even notice it happening. Buy now, pay later has quietly become one of the most normal ways to spend money. It is built into checkout pages, apps, and everyday purchases. You do not have to search for it. It shows up right at the moment you are about to make a decision. And for a lot of people, it feels harmless. There is no long application process. There is no moment where it feels like you are taking on something serious. It is just presented as an option that makes things easier. You can have what you want now and handle the rest later. But what most people do not realize is that buy now, pay later is not just changing how you pay. It is changing how you decide. And once your decision-making changes, your financial behavior starts to shift in ways that are easy to miss in the moment, but very clear over time. Think about a typical situation. You are online, maybe late at night, scrolling through something you are not planning to buy. It could be clothes, a new pair of shoes, a gadget, or something for your home. You click on it out of curiosity. You look at the price, and there is a brief moment of hesitation. It is not that you cannot afford it at all, but it feels like just enough to make you pause. Maybe you think, I will come back to this later, or I should not spend this right now. And then you see the option, 4 payments of $37. Suddenly, the feeling changes. It no longer feels like a $150 decision. It feels like a $37 decision, and $37 feels manageable, so you say yes. A few days later, something similar happens again. Different product, same process. You hesitate for a second, see the smaller number, and the decision becomes easier. Another payment added. Then maybe one more. Nothing feels out of control. Nothing feels irresponsible. Each decision makes sense in the moment. But over the next few weeks, something subtle begins to shift. You open your bank account, and your balance feels tighter than expected. You are not entirely sure why, because nothing you bought felt like a big deal. But now, you have multiple payments hitting your account at different times. $37 here, $42 there, another $28 you forgot about. Individually, they still feel small, but together, they begin to create pressure. And that is when the confusion sets in, because it never felt like you were doing anything wrong. This is where the reality becomes clearer. Let's break it down simply. Imagine you make 3 buy now, pay later purchases in 1 month. One for $150, one for $200, and one for $120. Each of those purchases is broken into smaller payments, maybe around $30 to $50 per installment. Individually, each one feels manageable. But now look at them together. Instead of one payment, you now have 3 separate payment plans running at the same time. Each plan has multiple installments scheduled over the next few weeks, so your account is not being impacted once. It is being impacted repeatedly. And these payments do not replace your regular expenses. They sit on top of them. Your rent still needs to be paid. Your groceries still need to be covered. Your everyday spending still continues. Now you are adding multiple future commitments on top of everything else. And this is the key shift. Buy now, pay later does not just reduce the size of a payment. It increases the number of financial commitments you carry at once. And when those commitments overlap, they begin to compete with your normal cash flow. That is when money starts to feel tighter, not because of one large decision, but because of several smaller ones that were spread out over time. At its core, buy now, pay later is a simple system. A third-party company pays for your purchase upfront. You receive the product immediately, and then you repay that company over time in fixed installments. In many cases, there is no interest as long as you make your payments on time. That is why it feels different from traditional credit. But that does not mean there is no cost, because the cost is not always in the form of interest. It is in how those payments affect your financial flexibility. Each installment you commit to, is money that is already assigned. It is no longer available for something else. And the more of those commitments you take on, the less flexibility you have when unexpected expenses come up. There are also potential consequences if payments are missed. Some providers charge late fees. Others may report missed payments to credit bureaus. Even if they do not, the impact on your cash flow is still real, because once your money is committed, it limits your ability to adjust, not from one decision, but from many small ones that quietly add up. This is where the conversation shifts from money to behavior, because buy now, pay later does not just change how you pay, it changes how you think about spending. Instead of evaluating purchases based on their total cost, you begin to evaluate them based on the size of the payment. You stop asking, "Is this worth $200?" and start asking, "Can I afford $50 right now?" Those questions lead to very different decisions. One forces you to consider the full value of what you are buying. The other focuses only on the immediate impact. Over time, this creates a subtle shift in your mindset. You become more comfortable committing your future income. You begin to normalize carrying multiple small obligations. You start to feel like spreading payments is a smarter way to manage money. And that mindset does not stay limited to one type of purchase. It begins to influence everything. Subscriptions feel easier to justify. Upgrades feel more reasonable. Even larger financial decisions can start to feel manageable when they are broken into smaller pieces. And that is where the real risk exists. But in how your thinking changes over time. The most important thing to understand is that the trap is not obvious. There is no moment where it feels like you are taking on debt. There is no warning that tells you everything is adding up. It just blends into your normal behavior. And because it feels normal, it is easy to ignore. Until something feels off. Your money feels tighter than it should. You feel like you are doing everything right, but your progress is slower than expected. And when you look closer, it is not one big expense causing the problem. It is the accumulation of smaller commitments you made over time. Commitments that felt harmless in the moment, but changed how your money flows. This does not mean you should never use buy now, pay later. It means you need to use it with awareness. Before choosing that option, pause and ask yourself a different question. Not, "Can I afford this payment?" but, "Would I still buy this if I had to pay the full amount today?" That question reconnects the decision to the actual cost. You can also limit how many active payment plans you have at once, because the risk is not one purchase. It is stacking multiple commitments without realizing it. And most importantly, stay aware of your future obligations, because every payment you schedule is money your future self has already committed. Buy now, pay later is not inherently good or bad. It is a tool. But tools influence behavior. And when you use a tool without understanding how it shapes your decisions, it is easy to lose clarity. Once you understand what is happening behind the scenes, everything becomes more intentional. You begin to see the full picture again, not just the smaller payment, but the total commitment. And that is where real control comes from. Because in the end, it is not about avoiding every financial tool. It is about making sure your decisions are actually yours, not just the easiest option in front of you.